Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
This is the Cinereelists episode 576. My name is Kyle.
My name is James.
And my name is Zach.
And we're here to talk about movies, movie lists, and movie obsession for the next hour or so. All right, it's become a bit of a common theme or joke for you guys to poke fun at my introductions and call me ill-prepared, or they stop the show in its tracks, or whatever other descriptors you want to use.
Who's joking?
Well, I hope.
This is already so much better because you put a little thought into this.
So I was like, okay, well, like, how would Zach or James start the show? If I wasn't here, what is the witty banter that they're expecting?
Well, we only did that for 350 episodes or something.
Well, I want to do a little bit more recent one, because things have changed. We're on Zoom now, right? Versus when you guys were in person. And actually, you actually did this one in person. So I went back to listen to episode 570. I was not on that episode. I believe you guys talked letterbox lists as well as something else. I don't remember exactly what it was.
It was mostly letterbox lists.
It was mostly letterbox, right? And I was like, okay, how did Zach and James start this show? What is this? What is the spark that I'm missing? So I did a quick transcript of how you guys started the show. I'd like to read that to you.
Okay. Is anyone else loving the gotcha journalism we got going on?
I love it.
It's fantastic.
All right.
It's fantastic.
So Zach, you did the intro, and then you did the whole, here to talk about movies, movie lists, and movie session next hour or so. Then you said, how's that sound to you, James? To which James replied, sounds good, followed by awkward laughter. Then Zach said, great. And then you guys discussed for about 30 seconds about what's site A versus site B versus site C.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I can't believe I have been missing out on this incredible back and forth all this time. I'm so sorry that I do the introductions and I've cut into the mojo that is Zach and James.
Here are two things that I noticed. One, apology accepted. Number two, it seems that this little exercise that you underwent has been very helpful for you, because this intro was much more engaging than previous intros. So I think this is a win-win.
I mean, let's see how I do next week before you call this a win-win.
I mean, Zach and I starting a podcast discussing what site A and site B is like classic Cinerealist banter. For sure. I mean, that's been like since day one of this podcast, we've been debating what site A and site B is. For sure.
Well, okay, so then what is it?
We never really come to full terms.
Never come to a conclusion.
It's constantly shifting.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle, you have thoroughly convinced me that you should not be putting any forethought into your introductions whatsoever. You're right. It's a good thing that you come ill-prepared. You've convinced me. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm happy to drive the podcast to a halt in the first 30 seconds in the future. Not a problem.
Awesome.
We're at site A, B, and C right now.
Yeah.
This is site A. Zoom has become site A. This is the primary site. This is the primary site.
Can we call Zoom site Z? That makes way more sense.
No.
No.
Can't do that.
No. Can't do it. Why does it make sense? Because the first letter is a Z?
Yeah.
Any other reason?
No, that's the only reason I have.
So there's just the one.
It's a pretty good reason.
I don't know. Eventually we'll figure it out. Eventually we'll put all the pieces together. Just like
It'll
the movie
really
we're going to talk about
fall
today.
into place.
Right. It's all going to fall into place. We're going to talk about a movie about pieces falling into place today called Tetris, which is also a video game of the same name. Before we jump into that, though, we need to mention that there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube. Go check it out. Search Cinereelists right there, or go to youtube.com/Cinereelists. You could also follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/Cinereelists. Support the podcast, get extra after show audio, amongst other Cinerealist swag. You could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts reviews. We'd appreciate that. 5 stars only. Or send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com, REEL with an S on the end. Send us a comment, a question, a list suggestion, a movie suggestion, any of those kinds of things. We appreciate via email, and we'll discuss on the podcast on a future episode.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right. So Tetris, let's go.
I had nothing to do with this. That's all James. Just, I don't know, having a senior moment right there.
I wasn't having a senior moment. I was just seeing if you guys would fill in the dead air or not.
James, we're on the podcast now.
Thank you. Well, after
No
last
problem.
week, I used all my energy last week. I'm zapped. Now we're talking about Tetris somehow. Two very, very different movies. Somehow both thrillers. I don't know how that worked, but it's time to talk Tetris right after this clip.
Tracy. Tracy. What are you doing?
How's it going? Look, I just invited this young lady over to see how our new game fares with the female audience.
Uh-huh. Sure. Come on, Tracy. Paying you to sell my game, not play other people.
Relax, Hank. This game is swell. What's it called?
Tetris.
Tetris. I don't get it.
It's a combination of tetra, Greek for four, all the game's pieces are variants of four, and tennis.
Tennis.
Tennis. Yeah, supposedly, the Russian inventor, he likes tennis.
Here, Hank, try it.
That was Tetris, a movie that is now streaming on Apple Plus. It's a 2023 biological thriller directed by John S. Baird.
What's a
And-
biological thriller?
What did I say? Biological?
Based on a true story.
Biographical.
Biographical? Okay.
Did I say biological?
You
Yeah.
did say biological.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's biological.
Has organisms.
Am I missing the definition?
Still
I don't
fits.
think I don't think that word means what you think it does.
This movie stars Taron Egerton, Nikita Efremov, Sophia Lebedeva, Anthony Boyle, and Toby Jones, amongst others.
Lebedeva.
Lebedeva? Lebedeva. Lebedeva.
I don't think that's the proper pronunciation. I know it's I don't know what's
sounds
right,
better to me,
but I know it's wrong.
Lebdeva is probably right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably better. Yeah.
I hear you for sure.
Chiwetel Elijah 4.
Whoa. That didn't work.
Chiwetel Elijah 4.
There you go. I chiweteled
Zach, I'm
myself.
concerned about James this evening.
That's the first time I felt bad for Kyle. That we use that sound.
The official plot synopsis for Tetris, according to IMDb, is the story of how one of the world's most popular video games found its way to players around the globe. Businessman Hank Rogers and Tetris inventor Alexei Pajitnov joined
Chiwetel
forces
Elijah 4.
in the USSR, risking it all to bring Tetris to the masses.
That's the plot of that movie.
Mhm.
And it is a thriller. Somehow.
Surprisingly, yes.
I guess it depends on your definition of thrills, maybe.
Before we start, can I show you guys and treat our YouTube watchers with something?
Please.
Sure.
I brought something to the screening, my own personal Game Boy
Oh.
Mm.
Ooh.
with Tetris cartridge.
I feel like this is a spoiler. Could we please blur that out?
No, people know Game Boys existed. But yeah, with Tetris.
Nice.
And
I put a lot of hours on this Game Boy.
you brought it to the theater and played it there?
No, I brought it to the podcast
Oh, okay.
right
James,
here.
Did you see this in the theater?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Is that literally your childhood Game Boy, or did you
This
buy
is
that?
my childhood Game Boy.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Wow.
And my childhood Tetris cartridge.
It looks in very good condition. Did you actually use it?
I used it a ton, and I always kept very good care of my things.
I was gonna say.
Those things were built like a brick.
Yeah, but most of them like turned yellow, or the battery latch on the back would fall off.
Zach didn't go in the sunlight. Look at him.
All right.
I didn't have to. I had a Game Boy.
That is a very white Game Boy. I agree. So Tetris, I'm assuming you guys have played it.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, so they had a screenshot of like computer Tetris in this movie where the backdrop was, I don't know, St. Petersburg or whatever that basilica is with the, cone shaped top.
Sure.
What is that called, Zach? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Red Square.
No. It's
give me a second. I'll
right.
think about
Anyway,
it.
so I had that Tetris as a kid. Like we had a computer that ran DOS and I had a floppy disk I could pop in and play Tetris, and it was original Tetris with those cool backgrounds. Like every level had a different background to
Nintendo
it.
Tetris had those backgrounds too, though.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. Like I'm just saying I played it on computer and we had
Yeah.
those backgrounds. So yeah, Nintendo too. So it was cool to like actually see original Tetris on the screen and be like, oh yeah, I did play that way back in the day.
Yeah.
I don't remember when I first played Tetris. Tetris has been around for as long as I can remember.
Well,
So
but it hasn't. You don't remember like the first 10 years of your life?
Yeah, I do. But in 1984, I wasn't 10. I was like 6, 7.
But Tetris wasn't around in 84.
Isn't that when it was made?
No, this movie took place in 88
Hmm.
or 89, fall of the Soviet Union, or right before.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, honestly, I don't remember a time that Tetris wasn't around. So maybe I just don't remember the first time I played Tetris. Couldn't
You
tell
saw Return of the Jedi in the theater and then immediately went home and played Tetris. Is that your correct memory?
No, I'm just saying, like, I don't remember a time that Tetris wasn't around. I don't remember like it coming out of nowhere and being very popular. I just remember
I
it
assumed it was
existing.
hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
Like you thought it was like an old cube game that they used to play on boards that got turned into a video game?
Sure. Yeah.
Must have been, yeah.
Like Go.
Like I remember the first time I played Super Mario Brothers. That was like a major event
Me too.
for me.
Right.
But
I remember the
But I
first
don't remember the first time I ever saw somebody play Tetris.
I will agree. Tetris seems like a game that is older than it actually is. And I was surprised that this movie took place in the late 80s, and that's when Tetris was invented. So I understand where you're coming from, James.
Thank you. Yeah, so this movie is the story of the guys that brought it's mostly the story of the guys that brought Tetris to the rest of the world and like their business dealings. Both
The whole movie is about buying licensing rights to Tetris.
for sure.
Yeah, from a closed off fascist country or communist country.
No, not fascist.
Sorry,
yeah.
communist country. Dictatorship. Let's put it that way.
Mhm. So it's less about like actually making the game or the person that made the game or anything like that, and more about like the, I don't know, business intrigue that occurred to make it proliferate across the world and who made money off of it and who didn't and those types of things. The stories behind the personalities who were involved in all that stuff. And Taron Egerton plays Hank Rogers, who is kind of like, I don't know, what would you call him? He's a video game distributor, like a one-man shop video game distributor.
Yeah, he has a software company.
employees. Yeah.
Right.
Right, but he seems to be more interested in distributing Tetris than trying to create his own game.
Yeah.
Well, I think Go is his own game, and then he wanted to license Tetris.
Well, he didn't invent Go. He programmed a Go game.
Yeah.
Okay. Go has been around for thousands of years, unlike Tetris.
Sure. And then over the course, he gets the rights and then finds out that maybe the rights he purchased weren't fully his to buy. And a bunch of other stuff happens in the movie that we won't spoil, but there's like a whole other cast of characters of people that think they have the rights or are trying to buy the rights, that they don't even know if they're buying them from the right people. And, it's like this weird tangled web of who owns what, where, and who is going to get the money. And then also it's set against this backdrop of the political, the ending of the Cold War, towards the end of the Cold War, where it was like the United States versus Russia, or the United States versus communist countries, specifically Russia, and just how much paranoia had existed for so long, and kind of how some of that paranoia worked its way into these business dealings for this incredibly popular video game.
Right. He's not just trying to get the rights to this video game from other people. He's trying to get the rights to this video game from inside of Russia,
Right.
USSR Russia, Soviet Union, which is a much
From the government of Russia.
right. Yeah, which adds
Yeah.
a whole ripple to the whole story.
Yep. I remember hearing over time that there were issues like this, and that the game was like officially sold in Japan and then recalled because they didn't actually have the rights to do that. Stuff like that. And like that Nintendo had gone to some great lengths to get Tetris on the NES, and that it was on Atari, but I think they stopped selling it for Atari because of the rights issues or something like that. I don't remember if they stopped selling it. I don't think they like recalled it, but they literally just stopped because they realized they didn't have the rights. Anyway, I just remember hearing in the ether those kinds of stories as I grew up. And so I always knew there was some story here, but didn't know the specifics. And this movie, gives you the broad strokes specifics, I would say, in a somewhat, I think it's trying to emulate like a spy movie of sorts.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if one half of the movie doesn't even know they're a spy. They're just treated like it. So we've all seen the movie. What do you guys think of it?
Zach, did this movie click for you?
No. I don't think I particularly liked this movie.
Okay.
I found it rather boring. And I don't think I tend to connect with Taron Egerton's acting style. So I always, I don't know. I'm not the biggest Taron Egerton fan in the world. So that was a part of it. He just didn't seem like a real person to me. I don't know. And then the movie itself, it's so much about licensing rights, and probably 12 different times we have the same conversation of like, well, do you have computer licensing or just video game licensing? Oh, you just had the video game? Well, what about handheld? Oh, you lost the handheld. Like, it's the same conversation about like juggling these 3 or 4 different types of licensing. And I find it all very uninteresting, especially when it's just kind of like, I don't know why everyone at all times doesn't expect that they don't have the licensing. Because after like the 4th rug pull of like, oh, you don't have the licensing that you thought you had, just start disbelieving that you actually have the, like, you're not working with someone that's being straight with you. And then he was taking all these risks that seemed so unbelievable, like he just so cavalier when he has a family back home. None of it made internal sense to me. And I guess it's based on a true story, but I would not be shocked at all if it was very Hollywoodized, because
yeah.
I'd be surprised if the real story is as dramatic as this movie made it. So all those elements, including being just very boring to me, I was not, and convoluted. I mean, you have to constantly keep track of who is working for and with who and for what licensing. It's unnecessarily convoluted, I think. Anyway, those are my basic thoughts. I wasn't mad at it. It's fine, but I don't think I enjoyed it.
So that's interesting, because what I found the most enjoyable about this movie was the licensing arguments. I guess I thought it was fascinating that there was so many different facets to how this game could be licensed, as well as people using information to try and get different licenses, like the idea of like the handheld, which wasn't even an actual thing in the late 80s. But one person knew something from Nintendo, so they're trying to get this license, and yada yada yada, the back and forth. So I actually kind of found the corporate intrigue of this really interesting. I liked the was it the Maxwell, the mirror scope people? I mean, they were kind of cartoony, those 2 British guys. And so I would fault the movie for like, that was cartoony. Some of the Russians were a little cartoony. The bad guys in general were a little over the top in this or the villains, however you want to put it. But I did kind of like the back and forth over who has what and who knows what and who's trying to get ahead of the other person. Where this movie lost me was the Soviet Union political stuff. And Zach, I do agree. The risks that this character takes in the Soviet Union just to get a license seemed kind of ridiculous. I do wonder how much of that last third of this movie is true versus how much of it was the Hollywood adaptation. I assume the majority of what happened in that last third was the Hollywood version, not the actual story. But that for me was where I started feeling like this movie is a little silly that the Soviet Union would care this much about this game at this point and would be going through all these steps to prevent this from happening. Stylistically, this movie does something interesting at the beginning where it presents a lot of the transitions and characters and scenes in like this pixelated 8-bit form, which I thought was actually pretty cool. And then kind of drops that throughout the movie until the very end. There's an action scene, we can say, where they bring that pixelation back into the storytelling. And I kind of wish the movie had done more of that. I think it would have been more intriguing, more interesting just to watch if it had kind of embraced that 8-bitness of it all. So I mean, I was having fun with this movie. I wasn't mad at it. Taron Egerton, I like him. I think he does. I was convinced that he was his character. I was convinced that he was kind of desperate, even though I thought some of his actions were a little ridiculous. But I'm not mad that I saw this movie.
It was a little bit like watching Uncut Gems, honestly, where it's like this guy is like betting everything in his life on like something that's super risky, and you just feel bad for his wife and kids because he's got like this gambling addiction almost.
Right. He definitely goes all in. Like for him, like this is what's gonna make my life. This is what's gonna make or break my life. And you think this might actually break him,
especially when he got offered $500,000 just to walk away. It's like, take the $500,000.
But he knew what he had was worth more than that. I think that's the hard thing. I've never been in a high stakes business dealing, but I think if you have a gut feeling that what you have is worth more than that, and then you know the other person knows that too, that they're trying to buy you out for, like a quick cash. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say, yes, I'll take the quick cash versus no, this is worth more. And there's that regret. So you always hear about people, oh, they sold so-and-so for this amount of money and now it's worth billions of dollars. No one wants to be that guy.
I think I generally agree with both of you guys, but mostly Kyle.
Okay.
I think I enjoyed it more than Zach, I guess is what I'm saying. I liked the back and forth of all the licensing stuff. I thought that was interesting and far less silly than some of the other things that were like I watched an interview with the designer of the game and also the guy played by Taron Egerton, like them doing an interview together, and they talked a decent amount of time about what's real and what's not. And the broad strokes of that last section is real, but the way they executed it is Hollywood for sure.
Okay.
So like the chase scene is all manufactured, but getting out of Russia quickly was not manufactured. That was like a priority after what happens in the movie happens. And them all being in the same location at one time, all three parties invented. All three of them being in the city at the same time and having meetings and holding negotiations, real.
I actually liked that moment where all three of them were in the same building. Mm-hmm. And there was the Soviet representative was kind of bouncing from room to room, cutting deals. I thought that was back to the corporate intrigue part that was interesting to me.
Sure. The stuff with the wife back in Tokyo, made up. The stuff with the what do you call it?
Wait, he doesn't have a wife in Tokyo?
The bribery stuff? No. The wife in Tokyo is real. The stuff related to the USSR in Tokyo was made up.
Oh, that was made up. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The agent and the bribery made up.
The translator?
No, everything.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm saying. The translator was made up.
The translator. I'm trying not to be specific, Kyle, and you're asking me to be specific.
I'm just saying the translator. That means nothing if you haven't seen this movie.
Sure. Everything related to the government and the bribery angle made up.
Gorbachev didn't care this much about Tetris.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, as a movie though, I enjoyed my time with it, and I like Taron Egerton. I think he plays a realistic good guy in this movie. I like, in looking at his filmography, I wouldn't say I go to him for my dramatic acting high points or anything like that, but he's also not in things that require that of him. And I don't think this story requires that of him either. He just needed to be like the one well-intentioned guy in the room. And I thought he pulled that off just fine. I don't know who else would do better with what was on the page. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to get Tom Hanks to be this guy? And like, he's going to elevate it. It kind of is what it is, right?
No, Leonardo DiCaprio 15 years ago, 10 years ago would have played this guy.
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. But do you think that would have elevated it, or do you think it would have been the same movie?
Oh, I think it would have been more or less the same movie.
Right.
I mean, but I'm just saying, I could see Leo in his Aviator days playing this character.
Yeah. Really, I didn't have a big problem with the presentation, except for the 8-bit stuff that Kyle liked.
You didn't like that?
I think it was
like a documentary.
Yeah, it had a very cheap feel to me.
Okay.
Like this was kind of like the cinematography for it was so specific and drab because they were trying to like present, this world. And Tetris is kind of a drab game. Like for the most part, it's not a game known for its graphics. And whenever they would cut to the 8-bit stuff, it was, especially the beginning, was so colorful. And then it was probably intentional. They go from that to cutting to, 80s USSR. And then when they kept
the very colorful 80s USSR.
That's what I'm saying. Like it wasn't in the movie either. And I think it was a joke at the beginning, but then throughout the movie, when they would go from one building to the next, they'd bring back the 8-bit for a second. And it was just distracting to me. It was not helpful.
I recognize that it was in 8-bit, like technically, but it didn't remind me of Nintendo.
Right.
The 8-bit. It was kind of like it fits the qualifications of being 8-bit, but it was too modern 8-bit.
Well, because there's too many pixels on the screen. Like no Nintendo or TV could show that many pixels.
Well, yeah, but if you block them together, it can look like less pixels.
Yeah.
But it's more, I don't know what it was, the wrong coloration or something. It just felt too modern to me.
It was dumb and unnecessary. They shouldn't have done it. That and like the intro, like I remember Tetris being solidly like a Russian game, right? Like the graphics that Kyle was describing in the background, the music.
St. Basil's
was like,
Cathedral.
Sure.
That's what it's called.
Yeah.
The music was like, I'm sure not traditional Russian, but like some variation on something. I don't know. But it wasn't like any other game. And it was like, it was branded as like the Russian game type of thing. Why do you have this intro that doesn't play on that?
The times they incorporated the music into the score was great. I just wish they did that more because there's a lot of Tetris music.
It was cool. Yeah. Like just those 4 or 5 notes at the beginning of the theme.
Yeah. One thing the movie taught me I didn't ever realize somehow is that all the pieces have 4 squares in them. I somehow never noticed that.
Was that not an epiphany for you too? Okay,
I never noticed it.
I never noticed that before.
Yeah.
Or like the name that Tetris isn't just some random name. It actually means something. Yeah, I thought that was pretty clever too. Yeah, I mean, I will say that there was times I was watching this and I was like, man, this could make for a good Netflix 4-part series documentary.
Yeah, we could get even more contract negotiations, Zach. This should be 4 parts.
This, I feel like the successful version of this movie would have been Catch Me If You Can-esque. And this one did not have Catch Me If You Can vibes to it.
No, this is more Bridge of Spies.
Yeah.
Like you wanted to
I don't know
be
if it
less
wasn't
serious.
successful. I think it was successful. I just
for
don't
me-
think
for
this
me.
could be much more than it already is.
Yeah. They already had to dial up the drama to
Mhm.
get this. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
Because ultimately it's businessmen talking, right? With probably some like political pressure, but it's
Mhm.
businessmen talking
Yeah.
is the real story, I'm guessing. Right?
Yep.
Right. It's not about the heart and soul of the dying USSR as this
Yeah.
movie.
And honestly, what if they never got the Russian rights? Like, what would have happened? Like, let's say they just start producing this.
Nothing, because they
What-
were already producing it all over the world without
That-
real contracts and stuff like that.
That's why
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. Like when he found out we don't have the rights, I'm like, what's Russia gonna do? Like it's the cat's out of the bag at this point. Russia's not really a fair player on the world stage. No one's doing business with them anyway. So what's the actual consequence here?
I think when it was like smaller software developers, they were just kind of getting away with it. But when Nintendo was going to make a cartridge and put it in their Game Boy, I think that's when people were like, okay.
But like in the movie, the Russian officials hadn't heard of Nintendo. They didn't know what that was.
Right. But they would on Game Boy's release if they had just taken the game.
But
would have been
they don't know
everywhere.
what Nintendo is. They're not going to
No,
get Game Boys in Soviet
I got
Russia.
the sense the head of that that programming company hadn't heard of Nintendo, but he's just a CEO of a tech company. Like the guy who made it just worked for them. It's not like a gaming company. He just
Right.
made a game on his own.
Yeah. And
I'm
he's
sure.
a
What?
he's a government installed CEO of a tech company owned by right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of CEOs that's never heard of, Minecraft.
I don't know. I got it more of the impression of that Nintendo just wasn't a thing in Russia because Russia was so closed off to the rest of the world. Like, given whether he knows about video games or not, you think you at least know about Nintendo. It is the largest video game producer. Okay, let's say it's one of the biggest tech companies of the era. Video games are not, right?
Right. But like back then, the government controlled all information for the
Right,
most
so-
part. You know what I mean? They wouldn't know what it was. Especially like
yeah, I think James, you and I are agreeing. Zach, you're arguing that he doesn't hear about it because he's an old guy who's in charge of some
Okay.
company.
Let me present it like a different way.
Okay, please.
This movie obviously is a very Hollywoodized version of what actually happened, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put too much credence in what this one character said as a line because probably the real guy never said that line.
Mhm.
And there's no reason to think that Russians had never heard of Nintendo because that line is in this movie.
fair enough.
What I'm trying to say is the movie is saying Russians have not heard of Nintendo.
Right.
Whether that's true or not, but we can argue for a long time the veracity of this movie. Or a short time because it's pretty clear.
I am not capable of arguing more than 30 seconds. I peter out.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we took 35 minutes to start the episode.
Yeah. So are we at final thoughts at this point?
I don't have too much more to add.
Yeah. There's not much to this movie. I don't think it's particularly bad. I think if you're interested in the topic of Tetris and like how it ended up becoming what it is known to be today, as far as like how it became a household name, I think it's a fun movie to watch. I don't think you're going to walk away from it and think, man, that's the best movie I've seen this year. But for a, light topic on streaming, I think you could do much worse than this movie, for sure.
I think it's a fair assessment. I'm not mad at this movie.
I'm not mad at it. I just ultimately was bored for at least 50% of it.
I do think it clocked in at 118 minutes, so 2 minutes shy of 2 hours. It could have been 145, and we would have gotten the point.
It could have been a 15-minute documentary YouTube video.
Zach just wanted like the first 10 minutes of the movie and then last,
Sure.
It's like the 7th time he's going back to Moscow, and you're like, stop going back to, like, I also did you guys I don't understand why he wasn't arrested in Russia.
Yeah, he seemed to be flagrantly breaking their laws.
Yeah, and they're
very
like flirting
obviously
with it, threatening him. Why not just arrest him?
Right. Yeah.
Kick him
I
out
agree.
immediately. I don't understand. Did the movie give us any reason to think that they're like just being merciful, or like why not just immediately extradite him out of the country and not let him back in or something?
The only reason I can think is because that politician was possibly running rogue, so he couldn't make too much of a scene. So like it was easy for him to threaten and maybe beat up, but he probably couldn't go as far as arrest and deport, because then that would like alert higher powers.
Okay.
But that's me really reading between the lines. There at no point is it really made very clear, except for the very end, what his intentions are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is Hollywood writing either, but I think he had something that they wanted, which was a license deal that would benefit Russia on some level. And so the guy standing in front of them is there illegally, but he's there to make a deal with them. You know what I mean? Which will benefit them. So
But
why would
didn't
you
they just
throw
want
that
the
guy in
Maxwell
jail?
deal? Didn't they only want the Maxwell deal?
Yeah, I thought that's one of the British guys.
Right, but they wanted him to leverage the Maxwell deal higher. You know what I mean? Like at some point that changes once somebody gets personally involved with wanting the Maxwell deal. But yeah. I don't know. The other thing I learned in my post research is do you know the Maxwell family is like I think the main guy, the older gentleman who owns the mirror.
Yeah.
He's like Ghislaine Maxwell's dad or something like that.
Oh,
Who is Elaine Maxwell?
from Epstein.
Yeah, Jeffrey
Epstein's associate.
Epstein's like main girl.
She's the one who's on trial right now.
Oh, okay. That's her dad?
I think so. Dad or uncle, whatever. She's from that family.
Interesting.
Which has nothing to do with anything other than I was like, oh, well, money, you know. I know she was like a socialite of some kind at one point, so makes sense.
I've never I didn't recognize the name because her name is spelled like with a GH.
Yeah.
So I didn't know it was pronounced Elaine.
Oh, is it? I always thought it's
like
gave it a hard
Ghislaine.
GH. Or is it
Ghislaine,
Ghislaine
right?
or something? Okay.
Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell, I think is how you say it. All right. Anything else with Tetris before we move on to our list for this week? Nope. All right.
Letterbox?
Let's letterbox this. Out of 5 stars, what are you guys going to give it?
4.
4?
No.
Okay.
4 out of 10. So 2.
Oh, 2. Okay. I'm gonna give it 3 stars.
I gave it 3 as well. So a 2 and 2 3s for Tetris. It's time to.
Let's rank some movies.
Wow, it's time to let's rank some movies, guys. We're gonna rank some movies related to or with or set in the Soviet Union. Somehow in association with the Soviet Union. Which is a list that I only had 12 to choose from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think my short list was 13.
Okay.
So I did cut a couple, obviously, but it wasn't a huge
my short list was 15.
Okay.
Nice. Well, I'm excited that you guys had more to choose from than I did. I feel like that doesn't happen all that often.
Yeah, well, I also James, did you use just that one list you sent us?
Yeah, for the most part.
I branched out a little bit.
You found some more?
I found some more. So
nice.
Because I only had 9 from that list you sent me, but I knew there was I think there's other ones out there.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but we'll see.
All right. Let's start. I will say that pretty much all of mine at some point are set in the USSR. At some point.
Okay.
I think. I don't know. One of them might not. Anyway, my number 10 is from 2020. It's Sputnik, which is a horror movie, sci-fi horror. was pretty good. I mean, like I said, I only had 12 to pick from. This is my number 10. So how good could it be, right? But I've watched this one relatively recently, so I have vague memory, but probably more than some of these on this list of what this movie's about. And I remember it being pretty well made, really low budget, and it kind of felt like it dragged, but the acting was solid, and the visual effects of what was there, they picked their moments, and it worked very well. I just wish it had been like faster paced, which probably would have been aided by a bigger budget. But it's about some astronauts who have an issue when they're up in space. They come back down to Earth, and then they're like being evaluated by the military, the Russian military, and they're Russian, I guess, cosmonauts, not astronauts. And they brought something back with them, if you know what I mean. It was good. I liked it. I think I gave it a 3.
Okay. Good. My number 10 is Ninochka.
Okay.
And this is a Greta Garbo film, directed by Ernst Lubitsch. And Ernst Lubitsch is a director I really like a lot. And the plot of this movie is a Soviet woman who's like super dry, tough as nails, like just you're not getting any warmth or emotion out of her, played by Greta Garbo, is overseeing the sale of some jewels that have been like stolen from Russians or something like that. And so it's like it's a Greta Garbo, drama. And I liked it. It was good. It was, I think, the only Greta Garbo movie I had seen at that point. So 3.5 stars. Ninochka.
Nice. My number 10 is a movie actually made in the Soviet Union in the 1970s, 1973 to be exact, called Ivan Vasilievich Changes His Profession. This is a Russian sci-fi movie about a mad scientist who creates a time machine and accidentally sends two people who live in his apartment back to the 16th century during the time of Ivan the Terrible. At the same time, Ivan the Terrible gets sent to modern Russia. So the man who gets sent back in time has to impersonate Ivan the Terrible, and Ivan the Terrible needs to adjust to living in modern Russia in the 1970s.
Didn't this movie, wasn't it a influence on Back to the Future?
So, yes, the other title for this movie was Ivan Vasilievich: Back to the Future, 12 years before actual Back to the Future came out. I cannot find a connection, or I cannot find a piece of literature that says Back to the Future got its title because of this other time travel movie. But I find it far more coincidental that two time travel movies both had the title Back to the Future. So yeah, this is a comedy for the most part. It's a Russian comedy. I didn't get much of the comedy. It's obviously translated, but as a piece of history, I found it pretty interesting to watch.
Nice. My number 9 is Reds from 1981. Wikipedia bills it an epic historical drama. This one was directed by Warren Beatty. I remember watching it because it came up on lists as American classics and stuff like that. It was nominated for an insane amount of Academy Awards and didn't win a lot, but was in lists of the most nominated films of all time. And I watched it. It was fine. I was like, all right, yeah, this is definitely a movie from 1981 for sure. I mean, it was very dated. I remember it being very dated as I watched it. The look of the movie, the performances, what everybody was dressed like, definitely stuck in 1981. And it was fine, but not my favorite. My number 9.
Okay. My number 9 is Top Secret! Starring Val Kilmer.
Yep.
This is a parody film from, I believe, the makers of Airplane, right?
I believe you're correct. Yes.
And Val Kilmer is a singer. and he has to smuggle a scientist out of East Berlin, and so his enemies are all, I think they're like Nazi communists. I think it's like a fake Soviet enemy, but
fascio communists.
yeah. But the whole movie takes place in East Berlin, so I think that counts as USSR.
Oh, I definitely agree that East Berlin counts as USSR, as you'll see later in my list.
Sure.
Is this the movie where Val Kilmer is performing on stage, and at one point he like pulls his underwear out from his pants?
Is that this movie?
I think it is.
Okay.
Right, because
he definitely performs on stage. He sings like an Elvis song.
Yeah, he's a singer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing this movie on cable, and like at one point he's singing, and like he's able to remove his own underwear from in his pants as like a gag or something like that. So
I think this movie is really funny.
I remember one moment of this movie.
I don't think it's
one point
funny.
where they're shooting through paint. You don't think it's funny?
It's odd because this movie is definitely like, you'd think it'd be up my alley. It was released at a time when I should love it. It's got you said his name, Val Kilmer, in it.
Yeah.
There's reasons to like it for sure. I remember seeing it maybe like once or twice when it was like actually a movie in the zeitgeist. I've never attached myself to it or thought it was interesting enough to care about. I don't know why. Same thing with like Weird Science. I know other people love Weird Science. I've seen it 3 times. First time I was young. Second time was like maybe a few years later. Third time was just to see if I was crazy.
Yeah, you didn't care for
Every single time did not care.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Top Secret fills that same hole.
Did you like Hot Shots?
I do like Hot Shots, yeah. Very different
okay.
movie though to me.
Part 2 is the superior of the 2 Hot Shots.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah. All right, my number 9 is The Hunt for Red October. This is from 1990, directed by John McTiernan of action movie fame of the 80s. This movie stars Sean Connery as a captain of a Russian sub, the Red October, that is headed towards the United States during the Cold War. So this is a period piece from a couple of years ago before it was made. And the American government thinks that this is a attack on U.S. soil from the Russians, whereas I believe Alec Baldwin is playing Jack Ryan, the Tom Clancy character. He thinks that something else is going on. And this is sort of a espionage thriller, somewhat, about what are the actual intentions of the Sean Connery character. It's been a long time since I saw this movie, but I remember being kind of a classic and having a fun Sam Neill performance too, as like the Russian first mate.
Nice.
My number 8 is from 1995. It's GoldenEye, the 007 movie. I mean, like a fourth of this is set in Russia. You know, like most James Bond movies, they move around a lot.
Yeah. Also an iconic video game.
It is.
For sure. Don't have much to add other than I just read that this was the first Bond movie to have CGI in it.
That makes sense.
There was a bit of a gap between the Timothy Dalton Bond movies and then the Pierce Brosnan ones. I can see that happening. Enough technology. Did they say what the CGI was?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
And there'll probably never be another one that doesn't have CGI.
Probably. I mean, even if you don't know it has CGI, it probably has CGI.
Right. Yeah. Everything has CGI.
Yeah. Every movie, yeah, pretty much.
I gotta say, back to Tetris, some of the CGI as they're driving around like Moscow was pretty bad. Like both shots of people inside the car and they got the fake streets going by on the side, and then like shots of outside of like cars driving by. I'm like, this is just bad CGI right now. I was unimpressed. I'm sure the budget on this movie was not huge, but
what's crazy is you were unimpressed with that, but I guarantee you there's like 100 shots in this that had CGI in it that you didn't even notice it had CGI in it.
For sure. But that's
like
how
background
CGI
removal and stuff like that.
When it's done well, you don't notice, but when it's not done well, it sticks out like a sore thumb.
That's true.
Yeah. Zach, what's your number 8?
Bridge of Spies from 2015.
Nice.
Directed by Steven Spielberg. This is a movie that put Mark Rylance on the map for me. I was very impressed by his performance in the film. He's an arrested Soviet spy. It's kind of like a Tom Hanks court spy drama. I thought it was good. I liked it a lot.
My number 8 is also GoldenEye. Not much to add, right? There definitely is the shadows of the Soviet Empire throughout this movie.
Mhm.
And this was my first Bond movie. And the first Bond movie I saw in a theater, obviously. And I remember having a uncomfortable conversation with my mom before I saw this movie where she explained autoerotic asphyxiation to me.
Before you saw it?
Just randomly?
So coincidence.
She was prepping you, or
No, but remember there's the spy in this she gets off from like choking people.
right? But how did she know that was in the movie?
She must have like read a New York Times article
Okay, I
about
was
it or
gonna
something.
say.
Yeah, no.
It's a strange coincidence. She's
Yeah.
I thought it was
teaching
just a
you about it.
coincidence.
Yeah.
No. I think she was like how old was I when I saw this movie? It came out in 95. She's like, all right, my 12-year-old son's gonna go see this movie. There's this woman who gets off on doing X, Y, and Z. I better just like prep him for that.
I need him to know everything about this topic before
Yeah.
he
So that was
experiences it.
that was a fun conversation.
I think you could have
Okay,
figured
have
it
fun
out.
at GoldenEye. You think what?
I think you could have figured it out on your own without the discussion, probably.
Well, she was trying to be a proactive mom. I can't fault her for that.
Sure, I guess. Nobody gave me any warnings. 1990, my number 7 or 6, 7, 2023, Tetris. We just talked about it. Next,
I'm so confused by what movie you're talking about.
my number 7 is Tetris. We just talked
Okay.
about it.
Love it. My number 7 is Rocky 4, which is a great Rocky film. I love the Rocky films.
It's not a great
It's a
Rocky movie.
Fantastic Rocky film.
All right, whatever.
Fantastic Rocky film. I watched all of the Rocky films in one day. For the first time I watched them, I watched them all in one day. But for whatever reason, we didn't watch them in order.
Oh,
Like we watched them all on the same day, but not in order. We did 1, then 5, then 2, then 4, then 3. I don't know why we did that.
like just working your way to the middle for some reason? Like a pyramid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Chiastic structure.
Zach, if you can use that every single episode from here on out, I
I'm
will.
trying, man. I'm holding on for dear life. I liked Rocky 4. I thought it was good. Rocky 5's a little silly. So compared to that, deserves an Oscar. But yeah, it's got that Soviet Drago, right?
Khal
Contender,
Drago?
and and he is he's someone to be reckoned with, man.
Sure.
Don't mess with him.
I was going to
That's
ask
my
you
number
guys
7.
if I should be embarrassed. I've never seen Rocky 4, but I think I know both of your answers already.
You should not. You should be. It's great.
Yeah.
You got to see the Rocky movies.
I've seen the first Rocky, and I've seen Creed.
Whoa. That's absolutely not good enough then.
I know.
You haven't seen Mr. T.
Is he in 2 or 3 or 5?
I think he's in 3.
He's in, yeah, because 2 is the return of Apollo Creed.
Yeah, you got to see 3.
Okay. Well,
And then 5 has a robot.
is 5. I've heard about the robot.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I might watch Rocky 4 because it's considered another classic of the series. I don't know if I'll get to 2, 3, and 5. To be completely honest.
They're fun to watch, man.
I don't
Mr.
watch
T?
movies for fun, Zach.
That's true.
It's a job that I don't get paid for. All right. My number 7 movie that is related somehow to the Soviet Union is X-Men First Class from 2011. This is the X-Men prequel movie with James McAvoy as Professor X and Michael Fassbender as Magneto. And there is this movie takes place in the 60s, and it takes place around the Cuban Missile Crisis. But in this case, the Cuban Missile Crisis is being spearheaded by evil mutants or people who are against mutants. I can't remember exactly why that's going on. But they take the events of the Cuban Missile Crisis and reframe it around mutants in the X-Men world. And I remember liking this movie. I think, this is the one that came out after X-Men Last Stand, where people kind of thought X-Men was maybe a dead franchise, and they soft rebooted it with a younger cast, and it worked.
I like that movie. My number 6 is from 1990, the previously mentioned The Hunt for Red October, which is a movie I definitely enjoy. I forgot that it was a Jack Ryan movie because I definitely don't think about Jack Ryan when I think about that movie. I think about Sean Connery,
Right.
who doesn't play Jack Ryan. I definitely don't think of Alec Baldwin, who did play Jack Ryan as a Jack Ryan guy. For some reason, that character, I have no association with Alec Baldwin. Maybe because in this movie, he's just a guy, right? On the boat for the most part.
Yeah, he's doing more talking. He's not really an action guy like the Harrison Ford Jack Ryan movies.
Right. Yeah. Or like the recent Amazon show, or pretty much any other iteration of Jack Ryan. He's more like just a guy on the submarine who is debating what they should do. I also didn't remember that this movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. That is a long movie.
Long for 1990.
For 1990.
Short for now, or average for now, I'd say.
I would say it's average. Movies have been getting longer, but if you like take the movies that we're not watching, like we're watching the movies that are like tentpole movies. For some reason, those are the ones that are long. Anyway.
True. Yeah.
Cool. My number 6 is Goodbye Lenin from 2003. This is a small independent film set at the almost exact same time as Tetris. I think it's like 1990, right before the fall of the Berlin Wall.
It fell in 89.
Right.
Okay.
But a woman in 1989 goes into a coma, and then immediately the movie jumps to 1990 when she comes out of her coma. And to reduce the shock to her that the Soviet Union has broken apart and East Germany has now been reunified with Germany, he pretends that the fall never happened and that the USSR is still in full swing. And so it's a comedy drama. I think it's got a lot of heart. I think it's a fun movie for sure. And yeah, Goodbye Lenin! !
I can't find this movie. Like, I can't even get it from Netflix DVD.
Goodbye is 2 words.
Yeah, no, I have added Goodbye Lenin to my Netflix.
You can
DVD.
locate it on the internet. You
Right,
just
I
can't
can find it on like Netflix. They're like, oh, we don't have it, and no one's streaming it. So it's a movie I've wanted to see. I just cannot get to it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
All right. My number 6 is another Bond movie and the last Bond movie on my list. And this is From Russia with Love, which is the second James Bond movie. Another Sean Connery addition to the list also. In this movie, it's normal James Bond stuff. He's trying to get a decoder device of some sort, but he is up against what he thinks are Russian agents, but they're actually defected Russian agents who are working for Spectre. But there still is it's basically the Bond movies making a Cold War movie without actually using the Cold War. But it's still the framing device to the whole thing. What I remember most about this movie is the main bad guy is played by Robert Shaw, who you probably know as the boat captain in Jaws. And in this, he is a huge, ripped specimen of a man. His first scene is he is shirtless in like tiny shorts. And you're watching this, you're like, that's the same guy who was the captain on Jaws. And it's crazy. But Robert Shaw does a great job in this movie, and it is a fun Bond movie.
Nice. My number 5 is from 2020. It's a movie titled The Courier. I don't remember if we talked about this on a top 10 last time. I kind of feel like maybe this was a listener recommendation. I don't remember. But The Courier is a spy movie starring Benedict Cumberbatch. And it's good. He's like much like Tetris, he's an American businessman who goes back and forth between Russia and the United States, and he's kind of tasked by the CIA to try to get information out of Russia. And he's kind of like a boring businessman who's kind of oddly intrigued by the idea of like like being a spy or doing spy-like things, and they want him to be very safe about this and like only do specific things, and he starts taking the role a little too seriously and like pushing the limits of what he should be doing, and obviously that makes it more risky for him to be detected as a spy, when in reality he's not really a spy. They just want him to take information from one place to another, not like do his own investigations and stuff like that. And yeah, so it's a drama with a little bit of comedy to it, but I wouldn't call it a dramedy or anything. It's a guy who's like in way over his head, basically trying to get stuff done, even if the CIA doesn't want him to do these things. And it was good. I liked it. I think I gave it a 3.5 on Letterboxd. So it was totally watchable and kind of a fun alternative spy movie.
Nice.
If you like Benedict Cumberbatch, you should watch this movie. He's all over. He's the main dude.
All right, my number 5 is The Lives of Others from 2006. And this is about a Soviet captain who listens in on phone calls, basically. So he, if your phone is tapped, he will listen in, and he starts following this one guy. Maybe he's like a journalist or something. And or no, he's an author.
Correct.
And the more he listens, the more he starts to question his own loyalty to the party. And I thought it was really good. It's kind of like a slow burn, but I think it's artfully done and worth watching. So it's called The Lives of Others.
Zach, if I had encountered this one in my research, this would probably have been my number 5 also.
Okay. Nice.
I forgot that this was a East Germany, Soviet Union movie.
Yeah.
But good pick, though. My number 5, I had a double check to make sure this took place during the Soviet Union, because this movie was made in 1929 and the Soviet Union started in 1922. So we're in the clear. So I always had to slot in Lives of Others there at the last minute. But this is an experimental documentary called Man with a Movie Camera.
Just for record, that's my number 4 as well.
Awesome. All right. I was hoping this would come up.
Yeah.
This is a interesting movie. James, I think you could like this. I want to make this one of your you have to watch 1920s movies, but I think there is something visually interesting to watch about it. It's mostly documentary footage of people in Russia, both in the city and the country, shot by this one guy whose name I'm going to look up right now before I forget. His name is, oh boy,
Dziga Vertov.
Thank you. It starts with a D. So I was like, oh, how are we going to do this one? Dziga Vertov. And what's interesting about this, it's cool to watch like footage of people in early Soviet Russia and what they're up to. But then he uses so many, what were back then, groundbreaking editing techniques like montage and cross-cutting, and everything we take for granted now was being, some of the first uses of these editing techniques were featured in this movie. So,
and not just editing, but like creative camera angles and like messing with speeds and stuff like that.
And even some like basic in-camera visual effects are in this movie.
It's wildly inventive, I would say.
So I think, James, as someone who probably likes the history of cinema, or at least, videography, editing, you would probably find a lot to enjoy in this. And it's only 68 minutes long. You can definitely find it on YouTube. It's public domain. So it's an easy movie to watch.
What's it called?
Man with a Movie Camera.
Yeah.
All right.
It's more creative than just about anything that comes out.
Yeah. It's a movie I watched for a list. I was like, okay, this is 70 minutes of documentary footage from 1920s Russia, whatever. And I was enthralled by this movie.
Cool. I'm into it. My number 4 is from 2004. It's Steven Spielberg's The Terminal, which is a movie I like. It's good. Most people don't like it, but I do. And haven't seen it since the first time I saw it. So I don't know if that opinion will hold on second viewing 17 years later, but that's what I got to work with right now. My number 4, the terminal.
My number 4 is Man with a Movie Camera. So I agree with everything Kyle said.
All right. My number 4 is Stalker from 1979, directed by Tarkovsky. Now, you can argue, huh?
Stretch.
Okay, so you could argue that this movie is not set in the USSR because this is a sci-fi movie that is set in a place called the Zone, where odd anomalies happen. However, if you watch this movie, the Zone seems very much like a Chernobyl-like place. It's this quarantined area guarded by soldiers who look very much like USSR soldiers. And I think a lot of the themes in the conversations would be themes that would be common to what people living in Russia would be experiencing at the time. So although is this a direct USSR movie? No, I think there's enough thematic ties to what's happening in the Soviet Union during that time to call this a Soviet Union movie. This was my second Tarkovsky movie. It's probably the one I found the most challenging, but also the one that intrigued me the most. Took me a while to watch it. It is 2.5 hours long, but I do own it on Criterion. Like, I was intrigued enough to actually go out and buy it. I haven't actually watched it again.
Dang.
I need to find 2.5 hours where I have to be in the right mood, because it's definitely a meditative movie at times. There's a lot of long conversations in Russia about the nature of existence and yada, yada, yada. But you have to be in the right mood for that. But there's also this interesting sort of sci-fi streak of what's happening in this forbidden zone during this movie. So that's why I want to give the Stalker a second chance, and why I made it my number 4 on this list.
That's awesome. Stalker is a 5 out of 5 movie for me.
It could be on second watch. I think I've recalibrated my brain to Tarkovsky in the last couple of years.
Very cool.
I gave it a 3.5. I watched it because the poster kept popping up on Letterboxd.
It's a cool poster.
Yep. My number 3, X-Men: First Class, which
nice.
might be my favorite X-Men movie. No, not this one. The one that was like 2 later. The Days of Future Past is the best one. But this is a close second. I liked this reboot of the X-Men series. I think they did a good job of like rebooting it without they kind of kept the stuff that was working from the old X-Men movies from the first round and creatively recast everything else. And I think it worked very well for the time. And I wish they would have ended it at 3, I think. Once they went to that 4th dip at the well, and then eventually the 5th. It's a little much, maybe. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. Was the 3rd one the one where it started to dip? I don't remember.
Yeah, 3rd one was Last Stand. That was
No. Last Stand. I'm not talking original run. I'm talking First Class era.
Oh, so you had First Class, then Days of Future Past, then Apocalypse. So I think Apocalypse was the dip, and then Dark Phoenix was kind of the nail in the coffin.
For sure. Yep. So I guess it was 3 and 4 of the rebooted series that was
correct.
Kind of the issue. But Days of Future Past is pretty close to a perfect X-Men movie for me. My number 3.
Which is First Class.
Which is First Class, which would be my second favorite, the lead up to Days of Future Past.
So my number 3 is the excuse to talk about my favorite X-Men movie, which is my number 4.
Okay.
Well, my number 3 is a movie I watched with Kyle. And I don't think it'll be on his list.
And I cut it from my list because I couldn't remember it well enough, but can I say it?
Yes.
Is it The Cranes Are Flying?
It is The Cranes Are Flying.
Yeah. Didn't we watch this over like FaceTime though?
Oh, we didn't watch it together?
I don't remember if we watched this together or if we watched it on FaceTime.
I don't remember either. I don't know why we would get together and then watch this.
Why we would or would not.
Would just, it seems like a waste of our time.
We watching
I remember
Tanger.
I watched it on my couch. I remember watching it. I just don't remember if you were next to me or on FaceTime.
I think I was on FaceTime, which is pretty much like being next to you.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, preferable.
Yeah. Yep.
The Cranes Are Flying it's a drama about like a Russian guy who's in love with a girl, but he goes and joins, into World War II. Okay. So and then the plot, and it's like the horrors of war, and that was a bad decision, and kind of his life crumbles. Okay. But what I loved about it was the way it was shot had such urgency to it. It's shot very wide and dramatically, and it just was visually way more interesting than it needed to be. And so I was into it for that perspective. Cranes Are Flying. That's a 4 out of 5 movie for me.
Do you remember the light fixtures in everyone's houses?
Yeah.
Those, I remember that's, if I remember anything from that movie, it's these elaborate like fabric light fixtures, which are the size of a small table that are just kind of hanging from everyone's ceiling. And this movie is shot like from the ground a lot. So people will be talking at like a dining room table, but it's shot from the ground, kind of looking up. So you're sort of looking up their noses and you're looking at the ceiling, and here's this beautiful light fixture in the middle of the shot. You're right. It is way more interesting to look at than it needs to be, as you put it.
Yeah.
My number 3 is a previously mentioned Bridge of Spies. Not a ton to add. Steven Spielberg, it's great. Tom Hanks, great. And Mark Rylance on the map for me. Liked this movie.
My number 2, Bridge of Spies. Ditto.
Nice. My number 2, the previously mentioned twice, Hunt for Red October.
Nice.
And I really like this movie. I think it is. I'm always down for a good, tense submarine film. I like movies with traitors and maybe double traitors. What's the word for a double traitor?
Double cross.
A double agent.
Double agent. Double cross is definitely in the conversation as well, James.
Yeah.
One fun fact is that in the past year, I've made a friend with a guy who was a submarine captain.
Oh.
During the 80s.
Oh.
And he was consulted by Tom Clancy on one of the chapters of this book, which I find fun.
So he's Sean Connery.
No, he won't. Sean Connery, I think, was Russian. The Russian.
He was consulted for the American side of things.
Well, he wouldn't say what he was consulted specifically on. He just said there was a chapter of the book that was sent to him pre-publishing to consult on the details of.
Interesting.
And then I found that really fun. So it's kind of my mission now to needle as many classified information nuggets as I can from him.
I mean, it's not like you just read the book and you got all the information you need right there.
There's more. That's unbook related. So anyway, Hunt for Red October.
Nice. I'm pretty confident my number 2 and number 1 will not be on either of your lists.
Your 1 won't be on my list?
I don't think
I'm shocked.
Unless I completely missed something.
All right.
I might have missed something. So I'm curious to hear what your 1 is, but I'm pretty sure my 1 is not on your list. But my number 2 is Atomic Blonde from 2017, directed by David Leitch, who's one of the directors of the original John Wick movie. This movie stars Charlize Theron as a MI6 agent. She's sent to Berlin technically after the Soviet Union has collapsed. But I mean, we're talking like days afterwards. So she's still dealing with the fallout of the Soviet Union, even though it's no longer a thing. And she is trying to investigate the murder of another agent, as well as find this list of missing double agents. James McAvoy is also in this movie as an MI6 agent, as well as other people. This movie, for me, had a ton of style to it. It kind of has this drenched in late 80s neon look to it. Charlize Theron's great in it, as always, as expected. It also has a cool stairway fight a lot of people remember, which is a fake oneer, but I just want to let you guys know I've come around on the fake oneers about the narrative necessity of them. And this one fulfills the narrative necessity of being a oneer, because I think so often you watch action movies, like you watch John Wick. And John Wick, he gets injured, he gets a little tired, but his stamina is pretty impressive. It is, action movie stamina. And then you watch the fight in Atomic Blonde, which seems to go on for about 10 minutes. And most people, even if they are in great shape, after about 3 minutes of fighting, get super winded and gassed. Like if you watch boxing, right? Imagine boxers not having rounds to take breaks. Like they just they lose so much energy so fast. And this fight in Atomic Blonde shows like if you do 10 minutes of fighting, after a while you're just like throwing haymakers and just doing anything you can because you have no energy left. And I thought that this fight really captured what it's like to actually be going 100% that long.
Can you go, since you're a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, can you go a lot longer than your average person as far as like stamina?
Yes.
In a fight?
So it's for two reasons. One, I just think because of training, my cardio is probably at least average, if not better than the average person. But also at the level that I'm at, that I train with other people, there's a lot of conservation energy. So like, I don't feel the need to be using all my energy, all my muscle every moment. It's more looking for those opportunities to use some explosive energy. So I think because I'm able to choose my moments and conserve my energy and know when to attack and when just to stall, I can go longer.
Would you ever put yourself in a weaker position intentionally in order to like rest a little bit? One that you know you can get out of anyways? Like, do you ever like worsen your position intentionally?
I mean, I wouldn't say I worsen it, but there'll be times where I'll be in a defensive position. And I know that if I just do this simple thing, the person who's attacking is going to have to work 10 times harder. So that's going to both waste their energy and give me a chance to take a break and wait for them to make a mistake so that I can reverse the position, do something to my advantage.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also like to get better. I'll just put myself in a bad position just to force myself to get out.
Okay.
I need to it helps me to stay fresh. So
at least that's what you tell the opponent while you're fighting them.
Yeah. I gave that to you. Yeah.
James?
Yeah, I put myself in compromising positions all the time just to see if I can get out of them.
I was more wondering what your number one was.
Oh,
this was
okay.
The second autoerotic asphyxiation mentioned on this podcast. Jeez, James.
My number one, I'll be shocked if this is on either of y'all's lists, but it's Spies Like Us from 1985. I love this movie. This is what Top Secret should be, basically. Spies Like Us is amazing, especially if you enjoy Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd. And who doesn't? This is they were in fine form as of this year for sure. There's also like interesting director cameos in this movie out of nowhere. Like Terry Gilliam and Sam Raimi and Frank Oz and Joel Cohen show up in this movie for no reason, no specific reason. It's
Ronald Reagan's in it.
Yeah, it's just like, well, I think that's like stock footage. I don't think he's actually in it from what I remember. Anyway, directed by John Landis. And if you enjoy comedies from the 80s that were made by the guys that I've already mentioned, then this is like right up that alley. It's a spy spoof about these two kind of bumbling idiots who are kind of stranded in Russia, and they're trying to figure out how to fit in or melt in with the Russian soldiers, and meanwhile they have like no skills whatsoever. And it's full of jokes that are very funny to me, probably because I watched this a bunch, and so like the meme effect took over on some level, where I think some people see those scenes and they're like, this isn't really that funny, but to me it's hilarious. Like the doctor scene, if you've seen the movie, you know.
That's in this movie?
Is hilarious. Yes.
Okay. I know that reference, but I've never.
It's great, and it's very much a like who's on first style joke, but Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd doing it, and then the way they keep doing it over and over and over until it's like normal people wouldn't find it funny, they'd find it annoying. I find it funny that they just beat the joke into the ground. And that's the kind of movie it is, and that's why it's my number one on this list.
Nice. I've never seen it.
Me
Absolutely.
But I know the doctor thing.
Doctor?
Yeah. Doctor.
Okay, my number one, I'm surprised it's not Kyle's number one, but we'll see. In fact, we'll come and see. It's from 1985. Come and See.
Yeah, I cut this one because this was on my like favorite war movie list a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
So
A couple weeks ago.
whenever we did we did or whatever months ago, I can't remember. I feel like I'd recently talked about this movie.
Like 4 or 5 months ago, we did that.
Was it
list.
4 or 5 months ago? Okay, but podcast has no time for me.
It was
I
when,
feel like I had put
it was when that
movie-
Netflix movie came out, the one that was nominated for all kinds of Oscars.
all quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah.
that came out just a couple weeks ago, right?
No.
just in time for the Oscars.
James included Tetris. We just talked about that a couple minutes ago.
I know. I there was other movies I wanted to discuss, like
All right.
Ivan Vasilich, Back to the Future. So Come and See got cut, but
Yep.
Come
Right.
and See would have been probably number 1 or 2 for me. Yes.
Well, Come and See takes place in Belarus, which was a part of the USSR during World War II, and it follows a boy that joins the Soviet resistance against the Nazis. And it's probably the most harrowing anti-war film I've ever seen. It's filled with shocking images and just horrific things that this boy and a girl that he's traveling with experience. It's pretty memorable in a way that All Quiet on the Western Front was not for me. But Come and See is harrowing for sure, but it's kind of a if you're talking about the best war films ever made, this is in the conversation. So Come and See from 1985.
It just got a Criterion release, and by just probably mean like in the last year, week ago, whatever. And as much as I want to watch it on like Criterion, Blu-ray, I don't know if I want to watch the movie again.
Okay. I'd watch it again.
Maybe you and I can watch it on Blu-ray together sometime. Okay. I gotta be prepared for that. I gotta be prepared for Stalker. I gotta prep myself for some of these movies.
You guys are up for quite the marathon. You're going to watch Come and See and Stalker together back to back.
We'll watch like Pootie Tang or Alien in the middle just as a palate cleanser.
All right.
All right. My number 1 is a Cold War thriller called The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. This is starring Richard Burton. Richard Burton plays a CIA agent who is sent on a mission to pretend to be a double agent that's defecting to the Russian side, to the KGB. So I guess that makes him a triple agent, right? If he's pretending to be a double agent, but he's actually still
Triple
working for
agent.
he's a triple agent. However, as his mission continues, he starts to question whether the CIA really has his back or has his best interests in mind, and questions his loyalties as the mission goes on. This is a George Smiley thriller. So if you're familiar with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the Gary Oldman character, that's George Smiley. This is within the same universe. However, George Smiley is a minor character in this story versus like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. He's the main character. And I mean, this for me is what spycraft movies actually should be. As much as I love a James Bond or even like an Atomic Blonde, actual spy movies, there's not a lot of action, not a lot of guns. It's mostly just information and what people know and who you can trust. And I find that incredibly fascinating. And The Spy Who Came In From the Cold is one of the best examples of that.
Nice.
Cool. Never even heard of
I
it.
haven't seen it.
Is it in English?
Oh, yeah. No, this is an American production.
It's Richard Burton.
Yeah, Richard Burton is English, correct?
Sounds English.
But he is definitely doing an American accent.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know the name. Have I ever seen a Richard Burton movie?
Have you seen he was married to Elizabeth Taylor for a long time.
That means nothing to me.
Have you seen Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
No.
Oh, you should see that. Have you seen Cleopatra?
I'm looking at films with sound by Richard Burton. Probably not him.
He's
Have you seen The Robe or Zulu? Beckett?
I went to films starring Richard Burton on Letterboxd. I have it filtered to only show me the movies I've seen. There's literally zero.
Wow.
Yeah, he was definitely a 60s, 70s, even 50s. He wasn't doing much into like the.
He was born. He died the same year that Tetris was made. 1984.
There you go. No, Tetris was not made in 84, James. He died. Unfortunately, Richard Burton never got to live in the world of Tetris.
I'm pretty sure Tetris has always been around. So,
like the sands of time.
For as long as I can remember. All right. Well, that was our top 10 list of movies that are somehow related to the USSR.
Did you guys get the sense that this is not necessarily our favorite genre?
I mean, I only have 12 that I accidentally watched, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I had watched a normal an amount of movies that like your average film fan, I would say, has watched, I wouldn't have had 12. I don't think. And I also think that if you guys had limited your list to the footprint of Russia, you would have had very different lists than what you ended up with. Well, there were a lot of like East German movies and stuff like that.
Sure. That's Soviet Union, though. We said
Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Russia, what, 1990 start? I mean,
hey, I didn't give you guys crap. I'm just saying. Just saying. If you had kept it to the footprint of Russia, it would have been.
Don't you have Bridge of Spies on yours?
Yeah, I do.
Well, wait, but you can't say the footprint of Russia because does that count like Ukraine and all the Baltic states? Because USSR and Russia were two different things.
Yeah, I'm not trying to debate you. I'm just
different.
saying.
You're talking like Moscow, like current Russia.
I actually, would you even consider this a genre of movies? I guess it's a micro genre.
Like movies about the Soviet Union? I mean, I don't know. Like
a lot of these movies weren't about the Soviet Union.
How many of yours were spy movies? Like
a lot.
Just right now, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would say 6. Unless you count First Class, X-Men First Class as a spy movie. 6 of mine.
3 of mine.
Were spy
movies.
3 of mine. Okay.
7 of mine.
Right. So I mean, at least for James and I, most of the movies we see involving the Soviet Union somehow involve espionage.
Well, the good ones anyway. There were 2 on my list that dropped that I don't think were about that.
Which 2 did you drop?
It's a good question that I have the answer for. I dropped Firefox. It's a movie I don't even remember.
Is that a Clint Eastwood movie? I remember you talking about that. You watched it because of the poster, and it was terrible.
Yeah. And K-19, The Widowmaker.
Oh, Harrison Ford, right?
Which that's not a spy movie, but it's definitely like a Russian paranoia war movie type.
Right. Yeah.
K-19 I gave 1.5 stars. That's pretty low for a submarine movie.
That's pretty low.
Is that Catherine Bigelow? Did she direct that?
No.
No.
I don't believe so. I'm going to click just to make sure, but I'd be shocked if she directed that. Wow. Letterboxd is being slow. Crew.
Directed by Catherine Bigelow.
Catherine Bigelow.
It is Catherine Bigelow. All right.
I'm shocked.
Why are you shocked?
Now I have to rewatch it.
Doesn't she make like war films?
I think
I'm
he's
not
shocked,
shocked
by the
that she would make a war-related movie. I'm shocked that I liked it to the tune of 1.5, and now I feel like I need to rewatch it.
Okay. Now that you know you're supposed to like it.
No, now that I know that a very competent director directed it, and maybe I missed something.
What happened to Catherine Bigelow?
What do you mean? What happened to her?
She made Detroit, which didn't do well, and that put her in director jail.
Detroit was good. Remember Detroit? I mean, that's a rough movie for people to be a fan of, but it was well made.
Yeah, but I don't think it didn't take off like Hurt Locker or Zero Dark 30 did. And I just think, because of
6 years ago.
Right. And it's because she's not like a white dude. When she makes one bad movie, they're like, oh, well, you're done. That's an oversimplification, I realize.
Do you think if Detroit came out today, it would be received differently?
Like, because it'd be more topical?
I mean...
Oh, I remember Detroit. That was good.
Yeah. Yeah, Detroit was good. I guess, when did Detroit come out? 2017? I mean, that was post Moonlight, right? Moonlight was 2015-ish into 16, I think, was when it won the Academy Award.
2016 Oscars, yeah.
So there was already kind of like an Oscar so white push, right, at that point, for the most part. I don't remember when that happened.
Definitely the mid 2010s was when the Oscar so white was starting to
Right.
happen.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard movie to like champion because it's so dark and like nothing good happens in that movie. You know what I mean? So I do think that's a good movie, but K-19, The Widowmaker, is not that movie from my memory, which is not very good for this movie that I saw in 2002. Now I know what I got to rewatch.
She does have one movie in development.
What's that? The title?
Aurora. A divorced mother who must now do everything she can to protect her teenager and her estranged brother, a wealthy Silicon Valley CEO who has built a luxurious bunker in the desert for just such a disaster.
What's the disaster? They don't say what the disaster is, though.
They don't say the disaster.
At first, I thought she was trying to just protect her wealthy brother. I'm like, well, why? He seems like he's going to be okay.
It's written by David Koepp.
Okay.
He's a comedy writer, isn't he?
A comedy writer. No.
No?
No. His credits, though, are impressive. I don't know what role he played in everything, but he's credited for the screenplay of Jurassic Park.
Heard of it?
Just another comedy I love.
He's one of Michael Crichton and David Koepp are the screenwriters for Jurassic Park. He also did Mission Impossible.
96, the first one?
Yep.
Okay.
Snake Eyes. Panic Room. Spider-Man.
The new G.I. Joe movies, like I was looking online at like a triple pack of the G.I. Joe movies on 4K.
Okay.
And I was like, I can't think of a weirder franchise that exists with like no cultural footprint whatsoever. Like within the last 10 years, 3 G.I. Joe movies have come out. All of them with really big budgets. And yet nobody ever talks about G.I. Joe movies. As far as I can tell, there's no fandom. Nobody's cosplaying as G.I. Joe people at conventions. You know what I mean? Like there's just nothing going on. And yet they made 3 of them somehow. Evidently it makes enough money to make it worth, making more of them. But like Arnold Schwarzenegger was in a G.I. Joe movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger? No, The Rock. The Rock was in a G.I. Joe movie.
Was Snake Eyes a G.I. Joe movie?
Yes.
Yeah, most recent one.
It made its lifetime gross was $40 million.
Ooh.
Oh, so maybe that was the end of the G.I. Joe movies.
Yeah. It was G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra was $300 million. G.I. Joe Retaliation $375 million.
Oh.
Snake Eyes $40 million.
Right.
So
but when did Snake
money,
Eyes come out? I think
Snake
that
Eyes
might have been pandemic.
It could have been pandemic, yeah.
2021.
Yeah. It was one of the first movies to come back in theaters.
I've never seen a G.I. Joe movie.
Well, you're not missing anything for sure.
Is it safe to say that those like early 2000s parodies of the G.I. Joe, The More You Should Know videos kind of like killed the cultural, or that is now the cultural impact of G.I. Joe?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know what he's talking about, but I don't think so. I think to some people, yes, but to your average person, they never watch those.
Zach, do you remember at the end of G.I. Joe's, they'd have that little like PSA where like some kid would do something stupid and then a G.I. Joe show up and like, whatever. Say, hey, don't go play in construction zones. And
sure.
Right. So I can't remember when this was, like in college, early 2000s, pre-YouTube.
It's like on E-Bombs World or
right.
whatever.
Like someone took those little PSAs and they recut them and redubbed them into just sort of this weird artistic videos. They're like a
vulgar. It was normally
Yeah.
vulgar. It was early 2000s
right
viral videos stuff.
And I just remember like just watching those, with friends in college all the time and laughing over them. And that is now what I remember of G.I. Joe.
Sure. What's the name of the other guy that was in G.I. Joe movies that was like a big star? The other half
JGL was in one of them.
Was he?
Yeah, and wasn't Dennis Quaid in Duke? Oh, Channing Tatum was in one.
Channing
That's the
Tatum.
thing.
That's who I was trying to think of.
I know these, I know big actors were in these movies, but I can't tell you which ones they were in or who they played.
Right, because nobody cares.
Exactly.
All right. Did we finish the show? Is this the after show? All right. Thanks, guys, for listening. We appreciate it. Don't forget, you can always find us on YouTube at Cinereelists, or find us on Patreon at Cinereelists, or find us on Apple Podcast Reviews, 5 stars only, at Cinereelists, or heyguys at Cinereelists via email. Any of those we'd appreciate, as well as if you were to follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at Cinereelists, or you could follow me on my personal Letterboxd or Twitter account at EOJRB.
You can follow me on Twitter or Letterboxd at Shaban.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Peter SKB.
Next week, we will be talking the Super Mario Bros. Period movie. Can't wait. We'll see you guys there. Until then, keep it cinereal.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.